Well, greetings. It's Dr. Blevins, and this is a third and final coaching video to go along with the other two that just kind of help you with the major assignments. And so this time we're talking about the congregational strategy and how we engage that. Now, let me just point out that if you have your site open, that you already have the instructions about that. It's just basically evaluating current educational ministry using analysis. So it uses Chuck Foster's work in the assignment, write the strategy for possible changes and implementation for future ministry based on course knowledge, include the historical approach, strengths, weaknesses, age level considerations, comprehensive organization, and practical strategies for change. Oh, and by the way, be sure to use 2 to 3 bibliographic references. And you're looking at that. And if your knees are getting weak, remember, I also said one of the best things you can do is look at the rubric. And this one is a lot bigger. And you may feel all of a sudden like your knees are getting very weak. But let me basically remind you, we've been working on this all semester. So instead of having you bogged down with that part, what I thought I would do is actually orient you through the actual ability statements that we hope that this curriculum is designed to address. So the first ability statement basically is the ability to analyze and describe ministry context of its local history, that's CX6, or the MAPM, cross-cultural ability context is that students identifies characteristics of cultural context of ministry and assesses them through appropriate theological perspective, comparing existing cultures with alternative cultural expressions, and develops personal and corporate practices consistent with the kingdom of God. Now, you've got other places in the program, you'll probably address that. But with this assignment in mind, what does that mean? Well, it means you go back to week one, as pretty much as the assignment indicates, and you begin to investigate your congregation at large. Now, I've already coached on this, so this shouldn't be anything new because you're basically just, yes, pulling Charles Foster's Educating Congregation book back off the shelf, and you're walking through the church asking questions about, so where in the church do we find events that are transformative, or where do we see meaning making, or what are the activities and programs designed to inculcate and build community, and where are places where members of the church may be engaging the world and doing so thereby nurturing hope. And as I said from the very beginning semester, you've even got an entire appendix in the back that can help you demonstrate that you meet these ability statements. I also did remind you that you should also, excuse me, include some basic demographic educate information, not tons, but enough to know the size of the church, its location, how long it's been around, and a kind of general kind of makeup of the church. Uh, Not a full-on congregational analysis, but enough information so that if somebody's reading your paper, they would know enough about the church to go, okay, yeah, that's a pretty good sized church, or yeah, it's located in a suburban setting, and yeah, it's been around 50 years or 2 years. I mean, just those kind of core things to help orient someone. And then I've told you, focus on how the church has tended to form and educate over time. So that's what you're trying to capture in the analysis. Foster's categories work to do that, but if those have not been helpful, then you also have the 3 categories that come out of discovery discipleship, formation, transformation, discernment, or you've got the 6 categories in Edie's book. And at times, Edie and Lamport's book, at times, Edie and Lamport looks a little bit daunting. I mean, this chart here is just shows just how intentional they're trying to do to move from a specific challenge that's emerged over and against the church to what they think is a resource within the activities of the life of the church and the uniqueness of what that contributes and the giftedness that results from it. So they give you all that in a chart. All you have to focus on are, so what are those meaningful commemorations? When does mutual disclosure occur? What does generous humility look like? How about fostering people toward intentional citizenship? Are there certain types of faithful gestures that occur? And when are people actually brought into probing reflection? And there are chapters that unpack each one of those if you want to use those as opposed to Foster's 4 or Blevins and Maddox's 3. you've got a range there. I would say pick one of the three texts to analyze, use for analysis, and then kind of stick with that instead of trying to cherry pick across the three. But basically, you have ample ways of analyzing the congregation, utilizing categories that have been designed with education and formation in mind. So don't spend too much time giving me tons of other types of analysis, maybe even things you've done in other classes. Just take what we started in week one and build out to make that kind of an analysis as you go forward. Then, if you've done that, then we move to a different kind of analysis, which is age level analysis and intervention. So CP6 is just basically, can you demonstrate an ability to apply knowledge of human development and leading people to Christian maturity? And so part of the analysis may include a specific ministry, a children's ministry or youth ministry or adult discipleship. Yeah, it can include that. I would just say don't reduce it to that. But you may want to ask, how well is that ministry doing? If you aren't involved in one of those specifically, you might at least ask probing questions about how those different age level ministries are doing. And you might want to lift up one out of them that maybe in light of your own mission statement, which you'll be submitting, needs some improvement to be more faithful. And it's a good way to do that. Always, if you are involved in an age level ministry and your tendency is to go there and think about it through the lens of youth ministry or children's ministry, always situate that through the total congregation. Do not get lost in a silo. So think about not only what's going on in your age level ministry, but also what is happening on the other aspects of the formal education and formation, but also non-formal and informal, and yes, even including the null curriculum as that as the children or the youth navigate through the whole life of the church. And so always situate an age level ministry against what else the church offers and where else it might actually make that ministry more faithful if it was more at least intentional in connecting the dots between the age level ministry and the larger formational processes and educational processes in the church. It's an important thing to keep that whole ministry context, that larger congregation context in mind for this assignment. If you don't, it can reach up and bite you. But you do spend some time doing both congregational analysis, which you should have done starting all the way back to week one, and then age level analysis, which you've had an opportunity to work on. Definitely, well, actually beginning almost as early as week two, and then extending on through definitely the contextual engagement that we did in weeks 4 and 5. So it's there that you can do. Now comes the strangest piece, because this again inverts a piece of the puzzle in the way this class is designed. Because once you've done that analysis, what you want to start asking is, well, how do we make this congregation or this ministry setting more faithful, not faithless to faithful, but just faithful to more faithful in light of your vision of what that faithfulness looks like. And so CP10, that ability statement basically says, can you envision and implement Christian education in your local church? And that first phrase, envision, is a piece of this. So, what is it that makes your education Christian? Now, your last paper should have already started setting that out for you. So, again, I'm not asking you to do much, but how would you describe, how might you input a paragraph or two that really names what you think faithfulness looks like and develop a mission statement for your context to address that. What needs to be done here to improve and increase faithful formation and education is the question. So you may, at this point, start with a mission statement that you are going to propose to respond to that analysis, and then provide me a couple paragraphs of why. You need not repeat the early paper completely. There's no need to import all that, but explain how the mission statement fits the church as well as your vision. And if you can do that by, in some ways, taking the analysis and your personal vision, then you can do that. And I would say stick to the big ideas. So at this point, you're not going to give me tons, but what seems to jump out of all of your analysis that you go, this is the place that the most pointed place where that we need a deeper, more faithful representation. And this is the most important place inside my own vision. And this is why they intersect. If that seems a little bit indirect now, once you've written those, I mean, you've already got, in some ways, you've got those two pieces together. If you've been working on that analysis, as I've encouraged you to do, and you have already submitted your paper on your theology and philosophy, it's really just sitting down and comparing those to see what really that mission statement has to say that both addresses the context and reflects your own personal vision. Shouldn't take tons, but it's strategic. And yes, I do evaluate for that. And then the next ability statement after that is, can you demonstrate the ability to oversee ministry using things like management skills, including servant leadership, conflict resolution, administration, and team building, which basically in this class just means, can you begin to outline what a strategy look like? Let me stress again, the way the semester is set up, the last couple of weeks of the semester is the first time you really get into the kind of nuts and bolts of that. I don't give you 20 weeks of how to do this kind of an approach because every context is different. You inherit certain ways and approaches. You're trying to be adaptive within those, but can you outline some of the elements of what you need to address, the goals that you need to set for improvement? Can you identify some specific strategies? Doesn't have to be a laundry list. It might actually be, depending on how good the quality analysis, as I've said before, is, may just be one or two very, very strategic moves that you're going to argue for, but they are the kind that you can envision over a 2-year period, actually moving that congregation to a more faithful education and formation. And that is how you then sort of go, well, here's the bigger vision of what needs to be addressed. Here is the most important thing that has to be done. It'll take about 2 years. And are there certain kinds of goals I can need to set as those 2 years unfold? That there are some things you have to take care of first. That's the prior uh, concerns before you actually reach the ultimate priority of the major piece. And that way, you are kind of walking me and other readers through how you would envision change in a congregation over a 3-year period. Then the kind of questions is, who needs to be in place? What kind of leadership is needed? Do you anticipate challenges? I mean, that's that conflict resolution question. Are you going to have pushback in that church? And let me stress again, all of that is really not massive sections of the paper, but it's woven together so that, yeah, understanding what leadership and team building and how would you go about doing that in light of this project and what would happen if conflict might arise. That may be a sentence that you name of something you're anticipating and how you might be ready to respond to that. Let me stress again that ultimately that component of the paper could really focus more on small moves as much as a major overhaul of the ministry or the congregational context. But those moves have to be well reflective of the analysis and your vision and the strategic implementation of those moves over, say, a 2-year period of time. So I hope in some ways that gives you the last part of the paper and what we're hoping to see and how it unpacks itself from that standpoint. I know as you write this paper, that'll be the last thing in your head. So just a reminder, don't forget the analysis. Don't forget the underlying vision and the mission statement that goes with that, even as you begin to address this. Let me just close by, in advance, knowing this video is coming ahead of time, just saying thank you. By the time we're engaged in this material, you'll probably have already been, up to your neck in a lot of the elements, and they'll be, I hope, handy even as you are writing out the last component of and last assignment for this paper. But when you hand that to me, I know that becomes the summative work that you've done for this semester. And I just thank you for the work in advance that I know I'm going to receive. And I think it's going to make a big difference. So I'll be praying for you as we get to that point in the semester. And I will be looking forward to those final assessments. And I really do expect that you will actually meet all those outcomes. Don't forget, again, the bibliography and to format. I will go ahead and say those. Just venerable old professor, make it readable, do use citations, do document those things. Don't lose that. But in the race to get this done at the very end of the semester, I'll understand if that is not the greatest priority, but it is really this comprehensive vision of moving a congregation forward or ministry forward so it might be more faithful. So thank you again for the work you're going to do. God bless.